And whereas some of the branches that were closest to the window were still moving towards the light, half of the rest of them were now moving towards the classes that I was teaching, the room where I'm sitting, because the vibration of what we were putting off, not just me, but the whole Zoom group, that kind of beautiful, loving growth, sunlight, enlightenment, they were drawn, the branches turned away from the natural sunlight and instead came into the room to experience and grow in this environment. And that's the power of our vibration.
Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Yeah. Peace and praise to Sun. I hope you all are having a beautiful day. We have a wonderful podcast in store for you today, full of knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment, inner enlightenment. That is the theme for today. So, Sandy Daliege designed the Arche Meditation Center of Purpose and Joy to help awaken consciousness and enjoy the journey of self-discovery to create a life filled with purpose, peace, good health, great relationships, love, laughter, and joy. She's been teaching for over 40 years now, sharing programs online at archemeditationcenter.com. I would love for you all to listen to this with an open mind, open heart, and trust. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the Praise the Sun podcast, where I am honored to have on Sandy Daliege. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm great. Ooh, you're so smooth, Sandy.
Thank you so much.
It's like, man, this has been in the works forever because you have that great vibe and that great voice, and it's so welcoming. So thank you for welcoming me here.
Thank you so much. And I feel like I'm finally living in my life's path. Because I've, that the what I was told is that whatever someone compliments you the most on is what your like gift that you're here to give is. And I guess consistently has been the voice. And I was like, okay, well, I got to do something with my voice to give back to. And I think this is it. It's just, and I love interviewing people. I love hearing about stories, and I love sharing them because they're always so powerful. And yeah, so I'm honored to have you on. My mom, my spiritual mom.
We have this connection that there's some people in my life that I always think, "Oh, these could be my children that I never had to give birth to." And I'm very grateful for all those moms who have provided so many great, I can't call you a kid, but you're older than you. So many beautiful souls on the planet are on the planet right now. They're always here. But
Yeah.
when you get to meet them, it's so much joy that occurs when kindred spirits meet again.
Yeah. And as my mom would say, you're always going to be my child. So I'm always going to be your child. Always, no matter what.
I know I say that to my daughter. It doesn't matter how old you get, I'm always going to be your mom.
Exactly. Exactly. So Sandy, could you briefly tell us about like your spiritual awakening? Like how did you get called to this practice that you do now?
Sure. I have to start by saying we're talking about families, and I was really grateful because I grew up in a family that was very loving. I was well provided for. I lived in a middle class home, and really life was good. But I can remember at a very young age thinking something was missing. There's got to be more to life than this because it can't just be a daily life. There must be something else. And of course, what I discovered eventually was that what was missing was my awareness of myself as a soul, that I already had a spiritual connection. Everybody does. But my awareness of it is what was missing. And because I thought there always needed to be a purpose in life. So let's see, I've been teaching now for over 40 years. But I met my husband. My husband actually had taken a seminar with this um, I'll call it a conscious way of living, a philosophy for life. And so when I started dating him, I really took a seminar because I thought, what is this guy involved in? I mean, I really want to know what it is. And when I went to the seminar and I listened to the ideas they were talking about consciousness, and we'll talk a little more as we keep talking, Sage, about the subconscious. And I thought, finally, I have people who are answering questions I always had, but I really didn't even know how to put them into words yet. And so it just made so much sense to me. It was like I guess I would call it a common sense approach to life that included, now I would call it our connection to the universe, and also taking care of our everyday daily life so that life becomes really full and filled with purpose and happiness and enjoyment. And so, um, after my teacher eventually retired, I kind of rebranded the organization, which is now called the Arche Meditation Center of Purpose and Joy. And I gave that a lot of thought because I really wanted to come from my roots. It's what you were saying, Sage, about, there's something where you have a calling, you have a path, you have a natural gift that you can share with people. Everybody does. And so, purpose to me, well, I was always asking myself this: who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? And when people say purpose in life, they often think, oh, I don't know, that's a big one. When really, it's much easier to answer than you think because it's really what you're already doing. It's just becoming more aware of it and you become more expansive, and it brings you so much more fulfillment and back to meaning of life, enjoyment in life, and you really shine. I mean, we are amazing creatures. We are amazing beings. And yet we have limited ourselves in so many ways because of past programming, because of what people have told us, because of whatever we've brought in with us. And so, purpose and joy, because this is another thing. Sometimes people following a spiritual path, somewhere along the line, they have been told it's serious business. And I think you can be serious and responsible in your life, but you could have fun and enjoyment too. And so, that to me, purpose and joy really put together the thought of what I had in mind for what I would like to welcome people to do for themselves in their life, because that's the thing I've discovered. You can't do anything for anybody, but you can give them tools to use so they can learn how to do it for themselves, and then it will always become more meaningful. I mean, Sage, haven't you found this?
Yes, absolutely. That's so wonderful that you've also said that, because I was recently thinking about how powerful it is to like, it's great to teach people things, but like the ability that they can do it themselves is like, that's where the real power is, because you don't ultimately want them to become extremely reliant on you. You want them to develop that inner power within themselves so that they can know it, they can integrate it, and then they can also go on to teach other people. Just like how it was passed down to you, it was passed down to me, and then it'll keep going. We that's Yeah. So yes.
And it reminds me, I'm sure, still thinking of families, I'm sure we have all had people who have told us what we should do with our life, what we shouldn't do, and it still doesn't really resonate true to us until you do it for yourself. Because then once you start to live in such a way, it again, it strikes a chord of truth and it resonates with you, and you're in that kind of vibration. I think we're going to wander around here, Sage, but thinking of the vibration, I want to go back to spirituality first. I have so many things in my mind as we're talking. But spirituality, this is one of those things where I like to remind people you don't have a soul. You are the soul. That's who you really are. And when you think that through and you become more clear on that, that at every moment in life, you are the soul. But we also live with a subconscious, which is that inner child within us, the one that's more emotional and the one that gets under stress and is afraid and all of that. And so learning to be who you are more often, this conscious way of life, you are there for that inner child more often, and it becomes that kind of parent child relationship where you can really guide yourself through life, guide your subconscious through life, so that it remembers to enjoy the moments of life. There's the um, present moment awareness, and you can really have a very full expression when you are enjoying life in such a way. And so I'm thinking of your podcast is called Praise the Sun. And if you look at nature, and quite often people will say, well, a lot of times I am my most relaxed when I am out in nature, taking a walk through nature. I mean, you can be under stress and then you just step away from work, step away from your computer, step away from life for a moment, go for a walk. And it's like taking a breath again. You remember to breathe. Breathing, of course, is one of those things that's really good to bring you back to a centeredness and a state of awareness. But taking a walk in nature, I was thinking of, again, your podcast, Praise the Sun. We need to get to know ourselves better. And so nature already knows itself. It is following its natural order. The flower knows it's a flower and it just is radiant. And the sun, praise the sun, even sunflowers will just follow that sun all day because there is a draw to it, there is a growth, there's a natural illumination that happens. And so the sun shining on the flowers brings out that most radiant expression of the flower. Our soul, our conscious self, paying attention to our own inner guidance, our own connection with the universe, and then paying attention to how we're expressing it in the world through our, you were talking about you with your voice, me, I became a teacher, and that ends up being how we express more and more of who we really are and become our most radiant illuminated expression.
Beautiful, and I'm glad that you ended on that note of illuminated expression because there are multiple meanings behind the praise the sun. For me, initially it was just kind of like praise the sun because I'm thankful for the sun. The sun is, without the sun there wouldn't be life on this planet. The sun has warmth, it's love, it gives me life, it gives all things life force. But also on the inner level of the soul level of the inner work level, we all can be the sun. It can be, as we grow as a soul, we become the sun. We become that uh, inner illuminated being that creates that life force that things are drawn to us, and we give life to other things just like the sun. We can become the sun. So yes, yes, praise the sun, as praise the sun out there, but also praise the inner sun within us because we also can be like that and give back to others.
And I like those kinds of um, stories, those allegories. You were talking about people and stories. I'm so interested in people's stories. Um, when I get to meet someone, I love if they open up and really tell me their story because there's a difference between, hi, my name is Sandy, and immediately goes, so what do you do? And it's like, all right, we're immediately talking about what my job is or what my career is versus who are you? What interests you? Where have you come from? That's why shows like yours, where you're really getting to know the person. I want to go back a little because I said I eventually ended up teaching and talking about the soul and the subconscious. People are often reluctant to follow their dreams or follow their path because of fear. The subconscious can be very afraid of many things, and so how do you move beyond the fear? And for me, for example, I was a really quiet person. I mean, my husband was the talker. If we would go into a room, I could just kind of follow his lead and he was the talker, but I was really pretty quiet and shy. One on one, great. I could get to know that person. I'm like there. But to do something like this in front of a group or to teach, my subconscious was afraid. And I thought, this is my life. This is what is calling me. This is something that I just really feel like I need to do. And so we moved past that fear. My soul, my conscious self led the way to kind of hold my subconscious's hand in order to help us move through those first scary teaching classes. And again, I said I've been teaching now for over 40 some years. And the way I teach now, it's still me, but it's very different because I have learned how to take a breath, relax, go with the flow more. Just be okay. Be okay with, we don't have to get things perfect. Oh, that perfection thing is crazy. You could just be yourself. You're going to make mistakes in life. This is a normal part of life. You know, when a baby first starts to walk, they don't get up and then hike a mile. They take one step and the parents clap and it's like, oh my gosh, we're so proud of you. Look what you did. Look at the achievement. And that's one step. So I like to think of our growth as baby steps. And if we can encourage ourselves in that way, then we take more and more and more. And eventually we're taken off and really flying. So to be able to get to know yourself, get to know what is your quality, your gift you have to give to the world? And all it is simply being you. But you have to discover what that means for you, again, because we've been told so many erroneous ideas. And so I'm back to saying we have limited ourselves in such a way. And then there's a point where we come where we get to be really expansive and instead just shine simply by being ourselves. That flower I talked about before is not turning around and looking at every other flower and thinking, the sunflower isn't thinking, oh, if only I was a rose. And yet, people do that. Oh, I should be more like this. I should be more like that. Why? Just be you, but be the best of you.
Yeah, I definitely, I feel like there are multiple things about that as well. At least from a, I can only speak anecdotally from my perspective, but anytime I'm usually comparing myself to anyone else, it's more so admiring this person's self development and the way that they develop themselves. And it's not to say that I'm a less than, but it's just I want to aspire to grow and and face my challenges head on and be able to share my story like whoever I'm inspired by. But then there's also the other people who are kind of on the opposite end of those things where they have that self-loathing thing. They have that thing where they don't think highly of themselves and they want, maybe from a materialistic perspective, they want all the things that this other person have, or maybe they don't think they're as beautiful as this other person. And God, I wish I looked like her or him and stuff like that, which is very, that's not helpful at all.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of gifts, what would you feel is the best way for someone to figure that out? Because I do hear that sometimes where people just don't, I don't know, they feel like they don't have anything to give, to offer, or they don't know themselves enough to, or maybe they just think they don't, other people might not be interested in whatever they have to say or something like that. Can you give anything about that?
Sure. That there's many things that are involved in that. Again, I'm going back to what people have told us about ourselves or experiences we've had that didn't turn out well. And so one of the things, I guess I want to go back to something. I have a class that's called Blueprints for the Soul class. And I titled it Blueprints because if you're going to build a house, you need blueprints in order to follow, to create a structure, to create something. If you're going to build a life, you need blueprints for your life. How can you do this? It's exactly what you're asking me. How can I find my gift? How can I do this? People want to find out, they talk about being their authentic self. What does that mean? What does all that mean? How can I discover that within myself? So, this Blueprints for the Soul class is exactly that. Like, back to the illumination, let's look at different kinds of topics we could focus on. So, you could turn your awareness to it in your daily life for a little period of time and see, how do you function in this? How do you respond to this? How does this work? And so you start to discover some of those qualities that you already have within you. Um, One of the things I really suggest all the time is to sit down. This may be really challenging for some people at first, but sit down and make a whole list of all of your positive qualities, positive attributes, accomplishments that you've had. And sometimes people think, well, I don't know, I couldn't do this. So I suggest you, if you had a good friend and you knew they were having a hard time, and you wanted to compliment them, and you started to think about your friend, what is it about your friend that I could point out to them that I really enjoy about them, that I really love about them, that they could use a boost? And it can be anything as simple as, you're a good friend, you're a good listener. It can be talents that you have. You're really good at your job, or you know how to play a musical instrument, or you're a kind person, or you finished school and you got a degree. I mean, all these things are things we've done throughout our life, experiences that we've had. And so when you start to actually write them down, and I do suggest you write it down. I know that there's a resistance there because we've been told, don't be so proud and don't be boastful, and this is like a love letter to yourself. Nobody else even needs to know you're doing it, but it will add to your confidence. It will add to your self esteem. It will get you to be honest about yourself, to start to realize, I have done some pretty amazing things. I am able to do this. I look at what I've already done in my life. And what you want to do is keep the inner critic out of it. So it's like, for example, if I was a musician, which I'm not, and I very much admire musicians because I think, wow, that's so cool that you could do that. Um, but to keep the inner critic out of the way, that it's not, well, but I could be better at this. Well, yes, but there's always that yes, but. And so it's like, just put the butts on the side for right now. Leave that behind, like where your butt belongs. Leave it behind you. And instead focus on, here's here's who we really are. And then read that every morning. Again, it might be a forced issue at first, but eventually you will start to see, it is true. I am telling the truth, and this is who I am. And again, it's almost like you start to uh, even walk a little taller because you're feeling better about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Blueprints for the Soul is by far my favorite name of any course ever. It's just, it is the pinnacle of perfect name from branding, from resonating with someone. Like, you hit the nail on the head. That was like divine intervention there. That was definitely got like Blueprints of the Soul. Name it that. That was, you got it. So
And that was that whispered thought for me too.
yes, yes, 100%. That was, yes, perfectly. Um, and I definitely like that aspect of us kind of like naming like our strengths and writing those things down, and that type of aspect, because from my experience, I feel like it seems most people, they don't actually know those type of things, and to take a moment and have some presence and be intimate with yourself and really list those things down, I think it could be an incredible boost of self-esteem for yourself, because now you're like, whoa, I actually know quite a bit of things. I actually do have a lot of value to give to other people, and I wasn't even aware of that originally. So it makes sense.
It reminds me of, I started this practice many years ago, and it was if I have a friend or if just a stranger, if I think something nice about someone, I tell them. And I will do this out in the public. I mean, if there's a server who's taking care of me and there's something about them that comes to mind, I tell them this. I'm big on praise. Praise is a form of unconditional love. And so, this idea of making a list for yourself, it's giving gratitude for who you are. It's becoming your own best friend. It's realizing I am praising myself, and this is a good thing to do. Looking at people out that I come into contact with, I have had so many beautiful stories and beautiful exchanges with people who feel so uplifted as a result. For example, I used to work at a pediatric gastroenterology office. So we would have a lot of little sick kids who would come in. And one of the things I did, among many others, but I would be the one who would get their height and weight. So the little ones were so cute that, I mean, some of them would be nervous, but really the younger ones, fear didn't come in too much. It was when they got older, there was a lot of fear going to the doctor. But a lot of the little ones were just there. It was new. They were curious. It was different. What am I doing? And so I remember at one point, I had one little guy. He was probably about, this was the patient. Let's say he was maybe 8 years old, and his brother, maybe a little younger than that, and his brother was about 3 or 4. And so the patient, the little boy who was the patient, he had on this dinosaur shirt. And so I said, "What a cool shirt. Oh my gosh, I love your shirt." And so he was like, "Oh, thank you." And here's his little brother who has his like little striped polo shirt on. And he pulls his shirt out and he looks down at his shirt and he looks at me and he goes, "What about me?" And I went, "Oh, you have a really good shirt on too." And I thought, that was an example of people are crying out for love. They absolutely need that love. And praise is such an easy form of sharing love and recognizing people's values. So people out in the public, I have seen people come to tears when I have said, I mean, there was one server in particular that it was a really busy restaurant. I had watched her with all these people. She was doing a really good job. And so when she came over to us, and she had a beautiful smile. So I told her exactly that, what I just said. And she teared up and said, "Oh, you don't know how much I needed that today. It's been such a hard day." And her whole expression, you never would have known it had been a hard day. You never know what's going on in people's lives. But so when I praise someone and they know it's true, because you do know when you get praise and it's sincere praise, you you feel good about yourself that not only is it true, but somebody recognized it in me. And so I'm not saying wait for outside praise. I'm saying give it to yourself because you are in fact giving yourself a form of unconditional love. So I remind people, and this is my gift, I think, of how they might pass it on. And I say, I started this a long time ago. If I think something nice about someone, I tell them because mostly the only thing that we hear is what we're doing wrong.
Absolutely. And I would assume that comes a lot from childhood of the conditioning of, you know, you can't do this, you're doing this wrong, or people insulting your intelligence or stuff like that. Um, that's major. I know for myself, I usually, whenever I'm going out or something to get something, I usually try my best to like compliment the server or whoever's taking my order because that's a really stressful job. Like it really is. So it's just like I just assume that most people are not going to do that, and if I can at least do that, I can at least give some type of praise to someone else, give that type of unconditional love to someone else, that grace to someone else, so that they can continue on and persist through their day with at least some type of praise. Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah,
And thinking of when I said I used to take their height and weight, when I would compliment really this happened a lot with the teenagers. I would do take their weight first. I would always find something to compliment, especially the young girls because they really had a hard time. But I would do it with the boys too. And when I would give them a compliment, they would stand up a little taller. And it was a visible thing that you would see right away. I mean, we don't always realize the impact we have just by being ourselves, being the best of ourselves and bringing out the best in ourselves. And that helps to bring out the best in other people.
Yeah, that's literally empowerment right there. Is giving praise to someone else, and they're like, okay, I feel a bit more confident now. That's empowerment in itself, and that's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful gift to give to someone else, and
I have
yeah,
another story with this. I was walking down the street with my daughter, and she's telling me a story. And as she's telling me the story, I glance over at the other side of the street, and there's a man and woman walking together, and she's talking. Now, I can't hear their conversation, anything, but there was something about her that was so vibrant. She was so aligned in her body, being present, being, I want to say, vivacious almost. It was just, and it wasn't about the way she looked. She was a pretty woman, but it was not that. It was the essence of who she was that really came forth. So I just glanced at her, and my daughter's in the middle of her story. She stops and she said, "That woman makes me want to stand a little taller." And so I think this is who we are. When we shine, when we radiate the beautiful expression and the individual expression that we are, which is so important, that's the gift that we're giving to the world.
that's amazing. That's so your daughter was the one who even picked up on that.
Mhm.
Wow, that's radiating. That's the sun in her that was just shining out and empowering. Wow, that's amazing. That's wow.
Okay, still vibration, thinking we're beings of vibration. So after COVID, I used to have an office in Oak Park, which I do love in person contact because I'm a hugger too. So, I really love that.
I miss our hugs.
Yes. A hug can send you out into the universe like for a long time. Um, But after COVID happened, I kept my office for like a year and a half, and then it had dragged on for so long that I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to let the office go. But in the meantime, I had started teaching classes by Zoom, which is how I offer classes now, is through Zoom. And so it was about 3 months after I had been teaching classes. In this office where I'm sitting now, I have this huge ancient Christmas cactus that was my son in law's grandmother's. It's that old. And so, since it's so big and a really big long pot, my husband and I, it faces the window, but every few years, because all the branches would be leaning towards the light, towards the window, we would take the pot and turn it around so that it would have a balance to it. And so, after about 3 months of teaching, he came into the office and came home from work and said, "Did you move the cactus?" And I said, "No. What are you talking about?" He said, "Look at the branches." And whereas some of the branches that were closest to the window were still moving towards the light, half of the rest of them were now moving towards the classes that I was teaching, the room where I'm sitting, because the vibration of what we were putting off, not just me, but the whole Zoom group, that kind of beautiful, loving growth, sunlight, enlightenment, they were drawn, the branches turned away from the natural sunlight and instead came into the room to experience and grow in this environment. And that's the power of our vibration.
Absolutely. You became the sun, or the sun became that room, that environment. And that's such a powerful story because the plants don't lie. The plants don't lie. Like, there was a reason why it started to go towards to that light. And That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful story. Um, so could you briefly talk about the the levels of like the mind, like the subconscious and those type of things?
Sure. Um, what we just said with that story, the plants were drawn to the light. That is the soul who was within us, which I call the conscious self. And there's, you know, the conscious self, the high self, the subconscious, these may be terms that people have heard before, but the way that I use the terms is a little bit different from other people. And I found it to be a really practical usage of how you can make the most of it. But in the same way those plants were being drawn to that light, there was a yearning there. The soul, the conscious self, has a yearning to know more about who it is and its connection to the universe, who it is spiritually, who am I, why am I here, those questions, what is my purpose in life. And so as we um, increase our conscious awareness, our consciousness, our soul yearns for more understanding of who we are, a bigger expression of who we are. And so, those, to me, those kinds of questions are something you get through meditation, which meditation is not hard. Meditation is simply thinking. And I know people think it's about clearing your mind and not thinking. I look at it a little bit differently. I think contemplation is clearing your mind, which is important for stress release. But I think meditation is an active process, a mental active process that you are just wondering more about things in your life and how you fit in. And those are the kinds of yearnings that you get answered from what I would call the high self, or our divine connection to, call it God, call it force, source, universe, whatever term you want to use. I think we all have an inner spark or connection with our divinity, and that is the soul who yearns to know more. And the more we get to know about ourselves, which is really our authentic self, I'm back to, you don't have a soul, you are the soul, then that is the part of us that will gain that enlightenment. And it's in small little ways. I love how the universe provides for us. You are wondering about something, or and you open a book at just the right page, or you listen to a podcast that spurs you on, or somebody says something to you that you have one sentence that you're thinking about just a little longer than you normally would, that has captured your conscious attention. And the more you think about it, the more you develop this spiritual awareness. And I would call it a spiritual foundation almost, that you're going to build the rest of your life. But then we also live with the subconscious, who is that inner child. This, I'll put it this way, biologically, we're an animal, just like every other animal. Our subconscious is who I'm saying is in charge of our body. That's who's in charge. In the same way, and in the same way, animals out in nature, they take care of everything for themselves. I mean, they take care of their food, they find the mate, they make the nest, they are very self-sufficient. Our subconscious can learn to be the same and is the same. So our subconscious is the one who's taking care of our body. And because of that, it's important that the soul turns its attention in two directions. One is for more of its spiritual growth, where it's turning to the high self. The other is to see what's going on in my world life, and how can I help my subconscious to go back to more of its natural state, its natural order, where it feels, back to what we were saying about the praise thing, it feels more confident about who it is, more comfortable with who it is, and it becomes the happiest version of itself. How can you enjoy life? How can you create a good life for your subconscious so it gets to enjoy life? So the subconscious is the one who has the physical body and is taking care of it. The subconscious is the one who has all of those emotions that sometimes can be like a roller coaster, and we can learn how to make the roller coaster a little less steep, so we're not always doing these kinds of ups and downs, and it's a more manageable kind of flow. It's more of a go with the flow, like a surfer. And the subconscious can learn those skills with our conscious help of learning how to look at life differently. The subconscious is the one who has all of our relationships that are so important to us. and our desires. When you think you're hungry for something, it's the subconscious who has the body. It's the one who's really hungry for something. The soul is a state of being. It's kind of just the observer in life, and the subconscious is the reactor to life. And we never want to stop the subconscious or interfere with the subconscious's emotional reaction to life. It's normal for it to have reactions: happy, sad, angry. All of those are normal, but when it gets to be too far, the soul is looking to help the subconscious move beyond all of those depressive kinds of ideas and the anger kinds of ideas, that it's you become kind of a listening block. In the same way, if your kid came home from school and you could see, uh-oh, something went on, because they're already mad, or they're sitting in the chair and they're gritting their teeth, and so you say, how was school? And they go, fine. All right. Well, obviously it was not fine. Something happened. So a good communicator, a good parent will take a little more time to say, so what happened at school today? And see if you can draw that out. It's the same thing listening to the kinds of inner dialogue that we have all the time going with the subconscious, and doing something to help influence those, to help the subconscious move beyond. I understand it's talking to yourself. People do this all the time. It's not weird, it's normal. um, that's why you're going to learn to be your best friend and help yourself in the same way you would help your child, instead of being that kind of inner critic. Don't be so hard on yourself. Let's look at it a different way. And that's what the conscious self, the soul, has the ability to do, because the conscious self is connected with this sense of peace and compassion and unconditional love, which is different from human love, which is the subconscious's version of love, and it's very important. But our subconscious love is very conditional. Think of the way people treat each other, and it's like it's the I love you, I hate you kind of thing. Divine love, unconditional love, is a constant. It is infinite. There are no conditions. It simply is, and it embraces all people. That's the soul is capable of that. The subconscious is not capable of that. It has human love, and that's okay. But we can learn how to kind of help our subconscious be around the kind of people who are going to treat us well, who are going to bring out the best in us, and pretty much remove ourselves from the ones that are not going to be healthy relationships for us. And these are the kinds of things, when you start working with consciousness, that it becomes a normal way of life, and your subconscious ends up benefiting and having a really happy, healthy life. Which happy life, happy cells, happy body, healthy body, all of these things fall into place, right down to abundance. The more you open up to allowing good things to come to you, the more abundance you have in your life. But many people live in a poverty consciousness, where back to those limited ways of thinking, or thinking of themselves, so nothing can get in. It's got to be an opening and an expression, and allowing everything to come. Positive things. Looking for positive things. Yes, we can grow through negative experiences, and we do, and we have. But I would prefer to be attracting now, and helping my subconscious to promote that in my life, more positive experiences to learn and grow from.
Thank you for that beautiful explanation. So, um, for our visual people, so say if I was to have this pyramid, which I have right here, um, if we were to visualize like the subconscious, would the subconscious be at the base and the soul would be at the top, or how would we visualize that? Was that accurate?
Okay, so the subconscious would be at the base. If you want to use the pyramid, I'll say the subconscious is at the base. I was going to do it different, but I'll go with that. The subconscious is at the base, the soul is at the top, but the high self goes beyond the pyramid.
Bingo. What would be in the middle?
Well, I was first going to put the soul in the middle because really that's
Oh,
kind of what we're like here.
okay.
The soul is really an extension of the high self, but when we incarnated, we we forgot who we were. We got lost in this animal consciousness. And so we're living in the base quite often, which is why people live in fear quite often because they're still in that subconscious mode. But when we get conscious, as soon as we get conscious, we start to tune into more of that upper part of the pyramid, as you were saying. So the soul starts to reach more and more often because it has questions, ideas, curiosity, and reaches more into that universal space. And then, because of what it's learned in that, I could look at life differently, then it brings it back to the subconscious realm, and the subconscious's life improves. I'll talk about, for example, arguing. Arguing is a waste of time. Arguing just means you got two kids, two, because the subconscious is like a kid, two kids who are just fighting. When you get conscious and you realize, okay, wait, this is, there's a difference between communicating from a conscious level versus arguing from the point of kids. When the conscious self gets involved, it's going to be peaceful resolution. How can we get a point across? What is the issue that we're really talking about here? And how can that be resolved? Not about being a bully in here and I'm right and you're wrong. Righteousness never leads to anything but arguments. And when I think of it's all from the point of view that you're looking at something, the conscious self, because it is one with that higher awareness, has the ability to see life in a different, more philosophical way, which will always promote peaceful resolution and and joy of life, a joy of the person, a joy and acceptance of the person. I can understand people and accept them and radiate divine love towards them, but it doesn't mean if they're being mean and nasty that I want my subconscious to play with them. I might remove myself from them, still being a divine spiritual being, but it's okay for us to set boundaries in that way. But back to the argument sort of thing, when we are arguing, the only thing that we're doing again is back to the kids have lost control and we're not being a good parent to step in to separate the kids. You know, if dogs are fighting in the street, people will even put a hose on them in order to get them to separate them because the fight's not a good idea. It's never going to be a good idea. But looking at life in different ways, I always think of if I were to put a globe, the earth, put a globe in the middle of the room, and Sage, you were sitting on one side of the room and I'm sitting on the other side, opposite ends of the room, and we were asked to describe what we were seeing. We would both describe different continents on the planet. And we would both be right because we would be coming from our own point of view. And so to understand that simple idea will help you to let go of righteousness and arguments the more you work with it, because this is a practice. It takes repetition in order to make a change. But to be able to look at life and realize everybody is looking at life in a little bit of a different way. And that can be the beauty of life, but it also can be why we can be more understanding and compassionate towards people.
Yeah, and I actually have. I don't think it's on my computer. I actually have a beautiful picture of that. Where it's kind of like a diagram where it was just basically showing that truth is relative to the perspective that you're viewing it at, and both things can be true. You know, I can be on this side describing the globe. You can be on this side describing the globe, and we can see two completely different things, but they're both true from our perspective,
Mhm.
and there's no need to argue about it. We can just find common resolution there and move on with our lives and our day in a peaceful, loving way. Um, so, so to encapsulate the idea of the subconscious, from your perspective, uh, it's everything that encompasses the body per se, like the animalistic aspects of ourselves, like you said, the emotions, the thoughts, and stuff. Would that kind of encapsulate that? Um,
Yes, but a little more, the subconscious is the doer. The
The doer.
soul doesn't even have a body. The soul is a spiritual being.
Right.
Again, we are a spiritual being having a human experience right now. We're allowed to have a human experience because we jumped in with this animal, which is the subconscious. But because we're the soul, we have this great intellect. We have also trained our subconscious some pretty amazing jobs, careers, expressions. No other animal is like being the doctor out there. We've taught our subconscious to be pilots and surgeons, and it's extraordinary. And because of our soul, who is the inspirational one, we've taught our subconscious to be the great painter. Oh, over here. um, and so our subconscious is the one who, any thought that we have consciously, the subconscious is the one who has to carry it out. So I'm calling it an inner child just in terms of its reasoning ability, is not as in a lower form, but our reasoning ability, our intellect, because we're connected to the universe, is infinite. The subconscious is limited according to this earth life. It's the master of the world. This is whenever you're going to manifest anything, it's the subconscious who's doing it. The conscious self may have the idea, this would be a good idea, but the subconscious is the one who brings it into manifestation. That's why knowing your subconscious and having a good relationship with your subconscious is so important for creating a really beautiful life.
Yeah, and I'm always careful not to uh, mistakenly insult the subconscious or anything because I don't want people get wrapped up in the higher lower thing and thinking that the lower is like less than the higher when that's not the case at all.
Mhm.
But
I like to think the soul is who we are, the subconscious is who we live with.
exactly. So also within the subconscious is that does that encapsulate the ego as well?
Okay, the ego is because the soul and the subconscious are so different. I think of it this way, um, Sage. I know you have cats. If
Yes.
Okay, so if you went to explain to your cat about your philosophical ideas about spiritual illumination, your cat might look at you for a while and just think, "How come you're not using that arm to pet me?" Or how come you're not going to like just feed me already? And so that's kind of our relationship with our subconscious. We have all these really lofty ideas, and although our subconscious is more philosophical, the more conscious we get, our subconscious even becomes more philosophical. It still is more interested in not what you're doing out there in the light somewhere with your divine love, but what could I do that would be fun today? And so my idea with my subconscious is always to make sure I call them snack breaks of joy. With me being so lofty out here somewhere, I always want to bring it down to, okay, let's let the subconscious have something. And I think of Halloween candy. They used to come out with the snack sized, little chocolates. So I think of snack breaks of joy, something that the subconscious could enjoy in life. But you asked me about the ego. So the ego, because we're so different, again, like that, the ego is something that it's almost, I'll put it this way. We go into more detail in classes, but I'll put it this way. It's almost like a higher extension of the subconscious that was necessary. So if I look at my subconscious as my inner child, I would look at my ego as my inner teenager who could be a little more rebellious, but it's a smarter kid. And it's like an older brother or sister for the subconscious who can listen to the parent. And, mom wants us to do this. The littler brother or sister is thinking, what does she want me to do? And the older one goes, I think I know what she wants. She just means we got to clean our room. And so then it's like, we could do that. Oh, we could do that. So the ego, and people have such a misinterpretation of the ego, or I should put it this way. The ego can have negative behaviors like a teenager, but it is our conscious responsibility to be a better parent, to teach it better, give it better guidance, give it better direction, give it the same kind of love we're giving our younger children, so that they grow into being the best version of who they are. The ego is the one who has the self esteem and the self worth. And so it's the one who then can help the subconscious when we have some big project that we're going to do at work. It is becomes the motivator and encourages the subconscious to be able to carry out whatever we're thinking we're going to do.
Beautiful, beautiful. And once again, I gotta say, your titles for things are just immaculate. Snack breaks of joy. You're If I start a new company, I'm coming to you first for the title. But okay, beautiful. So as we step up into the soul, what does that encapsulate? If you could.
Okay, well, again, I say that the soul is who we are, and once you start to be consciously aware, and it's like just little things that wake us up. For example, we can say something of a negative nature has awakened our soul, awakened our conscious self. When something has happened and suddenly you realize, what was I thinking? I'm never going to let that happen again. Your soul has awakened. And it can be something that simple, that there's an experience and it's a learning experience where you're saying, I will never let that happen again. But in terms of what it means to be the soul, I think this is a progression. We already are it, but our awareness of it progresses more and more throughout our conscious attention to things. This is why present moment awareness is beautiful, but being aware of not only what you're doing in the present moment, but I always like to include, like if I'm out in nature, your subconscious can be connected and really enjoy nature. But if I'm out in nature, and this is where people have often said, I really feel a deep spiritual connection where I feel as if I am, am connected to way more than just this little personality. I feel a wholeness, a oneness. Descriptions of the soul are awkward because we're speaking infinite, talking about infinity in a very finite way. And so the only thing I could say is the more you become aware of who you are as the soul with qualities like practicing praise, for example, that takes practice, unconditional love, praising yourself. These are the things that heighten and expand your awareness of yourself as the soul because it becomes a natural way of life that you live as a compassionate, peaceful, more centered being. Not all the time, because if even if we're working on consciousness, we're only conscious or expressing as the soul about 10% of the time. Mostly it's just the subconscious and all the world life and daily life because we're incarnated. But the soul moves into a more expansiveness of being at peace, and there's the trust and the knowing. The subconscious is the believer, the soul is the knower. Things that you know are truth, it's things that strike a chord of truth to you, that resonate with you. That's all your soul understanding. People find it, I said, in nature. People will find that in music that moves them. The subconscious may cry because the soul is so moved to such a beautiful experience of joy. The subconscious is happy as well, but it's like happy tears that might happen for the subconscious. Um, so many of those kinds of expressions where it's almost as if, and Sage, I'm sure you've felt this. I've felt this when teaching, where someone says something and some thought comes to you and you express that thought. And while you're expressing it, you think, ooh, that's a good thought. Like, huh, that came from the universe. That's the soul opening up and allowing things to express through you.
That's that's really 100% my evolution of spirituality for me at least, especially as I haven't made any music in a year, but as I became more spiritually aware, I began to really understand that the majority of the music that I'm making, I really don't feel like it's like actually coming from me. I feel like I'm channeling, I'm pulling in. It's like I can
Mhm.
hear the symphonies out in the ethers, and I'm just kind of just channeling it and pulling it in and trying to encapsulate. I really love that what you just said, which is we're trying to describe something that is infinite in a finite way. And I sometimes kind of feel like that's what I'm doing with music, because it's just like whenever I hear it out there, it just sounds so incredible that by the time I make it, it's not that it's less incredible. It's just it's hard to encapsulate something that is so beautiful and amazing, and get 100% one-to-one translation directly what I'm hearing into the computer. So yeah, I definitely I understand that. Do you feel like as a society as a whole, is our evolution, will it take us to the point where we're less predominantly dominated by the subconscious and more dominated by the soul level of, seeing each other as equals, unconditional love, and trying to like evolving into that way of being more harmonious as a species? Do you see that as a possibility, as an evolutionary step for us?
I think that we've been on the planet for a long time. And so I think that there is always a balance on the planet that, and I'll put it in these terms because we've been using the term light and enlightenment and all of this. And I hate to say darkness and enlightenment because really, I really don't think of darkness as in dark, as in bad or evil. I just think of it as darkness is just the absence of light. And light is that the breath of God, what we've just been talking about, the breath of the universe. And so it's different points of evolution, just what you said. But if I look at the planet, it has always gone through times of darkness and the times of light. And there will always be a balance that will come in that will, because the universe itself is created with balance. But the way that I look at it is that because I do think we have been here before, I do think we have had past lives. I think we've had many past lives, and we've been doing this a long time because I look at this Earth planet as school for our awakening, for our development. I was thinking that it's the way that I like to look at our spiritual awakening in a positive way is that it is self discovery through self reflection without judgment, because we don't need that kind of judgment. It gets in the way of our normal natural flow. So if I look at this at Earth School, that we have lived many lives, and each lifetime we're learning different kinds of things and different kinds of lessons, and we become more conscious, more spiritual. It reflects in our daily life, it reflects in our subconscious's life. But I also think if looking at it this way, I think that there is a point where we move beyond Earth School and we graduate, and we can move. And this is a choice every soul can make because we're already the soul. That, this is a misconception. You don't have to be enlightened to a certain degree before you get to graduate. You already are the soul. The soul has nothing more to do, to be, to become, to like do more on the earth, to do. We have contributed so often on this earth planet that it is a choice that we have, because as the soul we have a free will, but that you can graduate from, and it could be this lifetime, that you could graduate and move beyond in the earth school. The subconscious, because it's a separate entity, the subconscious with the ego will go and live on the astral plane, which is where we live between lifetimes already, and it gets to retire. It doesn't have to come back in this way and pay bills and have a job. And the astral plane is not a spooky ghostly kind of thing. It's the same reality as what we have here. The subconscious can visit its friends, its loved ones, it can go to classes, it can travel, it can do all kinds of things. And the soul moves beyond that back to its spiritual state of being with the high self, where it will still continue to grow and be who it is in this state of enlightenment. And that is our ultimate spiritual goal for all souls. And so, in terms of, I look at for the soul, this expression in the same way I was saying, we're looking to express infinity in a very finite words. For the soul, this expression here is a pretty limited expression. Now, we can do great things here spiritually as the soul, but a part of us, only a part of the soul is expressing here, and the rest is out in the entire universe. So eventually, that soul yearning to go home, there's no place like home. The soul goes home into its spiritual infinite space. And this is part of what we look into and delve into in the blueprints for the soul class, just starting from there. We go into much more detail in more advanced classes.
Beautiful, beautiful. And while you were talking about the high self, could you briefly talk about that, like what that encapsulates as well? I don't know if that would be even a good word because it's infinite. So, but finite words, if you could.
I guess the only thing I would say with the high self, it is all those divine qualities within us. By the way, the soul is kind of like a little astronaut who incarnated. When we incarnated with the subconscious, the high self never incarnated. It has stayed in its infinite spiritual state. It is the complete spiritual essence. And the soul is discovering, and that's why we're adding to the spiritual and glory of the whole universe. But the soul is, or excuse me, the high self are all those divine kinds of qualities, such as divine love, that unconditional love that is the motivating force of the whole universe. When we start to look at ourselves in the same way, in a motivating way, that is that's the ultimate goal, that kind of unconditional love. And then the high self is also the point where we get our all of our spiritual knowing, because it is everything we discover goes into the universe. So the high self is one with the universe. So that spiritual wisdom is contained within the high self. Um, Spiritual peace, peace which is a constant. When the soul is searching for inner peace, it tunes into the high self and we become aligned. That's really what we're doing, is we're aligning all these energies within us in order to be our highest expression, just by making every decision we make just a little at a time. And then joy is part of that divine expression of the high self, where and there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is what the subconscious feels. So, the subconscious gets an ice cream cone, I'm happy. It drops, I'm sad. It's like that up and down thing, where joy is a constant. It is always there. And the soul can experience an ecstasy through the high self. This is the tuning into those divine qualities in the high self, an ecstasy, a bliss, a joy that goes beyond anything that you will ever experience here on this plane. And so that's why the high self is the ultimate destination where the soul is going. And the subconscious then gets to really live a beautiful life here without the pressure that we put on it, which creates stress.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. From your experience, society as a whole, from when you first had your spiritual awakening to now, do you feel like spirituality is a more accepted thing? Are we able to talk about it more without, restrictions and limiting beliefs of, you know, you're not supposed to talk about that? Because I certainly hear that, that it was a completely different, how it is now from back then. So is that also, in your opinion, where we are now? Is that a yeah?
Yes, I think spirituality has grown since when I started teaching. I said I've been teaching for over 40 years. And at that time, one of the first classes we taught I think it was titled Reincarnation and Karma. And people were very nervous and afraid of that idea, didn't even want to open their minds to it. Or if they were going to classes, we had some people who would even say, well, don't call my house because nobody else knows I'm taking this class. Whereas now, just talking about meditation and spirituality and all of this have become way more acceptable, way more open minded, way more. I think consciousness has grown extremely. The ability and the awareness and the openness to spiritual consciousness has grown in a really a short period of time, because I'm talking 40 years, and that's extraordinary. So in the same way we have on the planet, you can see there's a divisiveness on the planet. There is also this beautiful, again, there will always be a balance of awakening, more people questioning things. I think going through COVID was a an eye-opening experience for people to stop, because they had to stop and think and question what's most important in my life, and what am I going to pursue, and what's most valuable to me. And I think those were great conscious awakening moments. As horrible as so much of it was, the consciousness that evolved, I think it was the planet gave everybody a time out, and it was time for self reflection.
Do you feel that this is like, the will of God, or whatever other synonyms people want to use for that? Like, do you feel like God wants the planet to kind of awaken more and have a bit more spirituality aspect to our lives?
I think what happens with us on the planet is what we are doing to the planet. I think this is part of our power that, quite often people will do something like, how could God let this happen? I don't think God had a lot to do with some of the things we've done on the planet. I think because we have a free will, we haven't always made the wisest choices. So it's starting to take responsibility and accept our responsibility in it and make wiser choices.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Um, so, someone who's interested in um, blueprints for the soul, and they also want to know what you have beyond that. Could you briefly talk about the next programs after Blueprint?
So after Blueprints for the Soul, and you have to take the Blueprints class first because we go into the basics, the foundation of what you need. And by the way, Blueprints for the Soul is a 12-week course. I don't offer them very often, and I have one coming up on Thursdays, starting September 14th. We'll talk about my website and all of that, where you can register. But it's amazing in 12 weeks, because we'll look at different topics, still working with this idea of consciousness. We'll look at different topics each week. And I have seen people in 12 weeks meeting every Thursday, Thursday evenings, change their lives. They bring out the best of themselves. They discover things about themselves. 12 weeks sounds like a long time at first, until people are in the courses and they're going, oh no, I can't believe it's over already, because they have grown so much, they have enjoyed it so much, they have evolved so much. And the only thing they're doing is giving themselves permission to have a good life and be who they are. They already have this beauty and power within them, and these classes help to bring them out. So after that, people quite often want to keep going with it, because it becomes a way of life. And so after that, I have four advanced courses. They're called Saturn courses. And the Saturn course is where we go way more in depth. Blueprints, I like to say, it's almost like going to a buffet where you get a little taste of all these different ideas. And then the Saturn program goes much more detail about each of those. You discover your own life plan, you choose your own life path. We in the Saturn program is where we start to look even at things like past lives, and we look at making a transition, what it's like. We look at any kinds of things that are really holding you back on an individual basis, that you can start to move forward with, so that you end up really knowing who you are, why you're here, and manifesting your fullest life, your fullest life expression and your full life. And there's four of those. They're half-year courses. They're 25 sessions for those. And those include private sessions as well, where if you ever get stuck anywhere and we need to just discuss something in terms of the class itself, that we do some one-on-one tutoring so that you really make sure by the end of that. And I have many people who have taken the all four Saturn classes, and their lives, they are those divine expressions, the light bearers on the planet. They really know who they are, they become who they are, they're comfortable with who they are, they stand in their power, they have great relationships, good health, all these things that are the benefits of simply learning who you are and how to express as that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. You briefly touched on past lives. Could you maybe talk about, like, are there sometimes aspects of past lives that influence our current lifetime? Things that we're not even aware of like, maybe we have this reoccurring pattern that might have been influenced by a past life. Could you briefly?
Yes, and first of all, I like to remind people because not everybody thinks that reincarnation is truth. And there's no way, you're never going to prove something. I always say that from the start. I can't prove that this is true, but there's a part within you that at some point knows what's truth and what's not. So I always just suggest stay open to the idea and think about it. But the most important lifetime is this lifetime. The most important time is what you're living today. Some people just think focusing on this life get lost in the past, or they're living in the future and they're forgetting the now and they're missing their lives. But in terms of past life, the idea of looking at a past life um, can be important for what you were just saying, patterns that have carried over. Now, we may have talents that have carried over, and it's nice to see them surface again in this lifetime. We may have people in the past who, and sometimes you feel that you're meeting someone for the first time, and it's like, oh my gosh, did I meet you before? Because you're like my old friend. Where did that come from? Well, probably because you knew them before, and the subconscious has the memory bank and it just remembers that. Places that you go to, in places that you always want to travel to. Why do you want to travel to that? Not everybody does, because you probably were there before and your subconscious, it was a good life and it would not be nice to go back and visit again. But the patterns that can hold us back, the kinds of things that are reoccurring things that keep happening again and again and again, and it seems almost like we get stuck. Sometimes you can go back and see where that came from in order to finally release it. And that's the only idea behind it, is to just allow everything that's going to hold us or limit it in some way, to free ourselves from all the old baggage and garbage, and stay focused on the beauty and expansiveness of who we are now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up here with my last few questions. What is your definition of living a good life?
Oh, living a good life. First thing that comes to mind is fun. And I'm saying this because I was the serious student, and I was, you got to get it all right. I was the perfectionist. I was all these things that I'm talking about. I finally learned to let go. And my husband was really essential in this with me, to learning how to lighten up and enjoy life. So I would say actually living a good life, because I always have to come from a spiritual perspective first, is knowing who you are as the soul, living as that, because it is who we are, but understanding who we are, living from that point of view, and then bringing that kind of peace and joy and enlightenment into your everyday life, so your subconscious gets to have fun and enjoy all the moments in life. I'll put this in. I live near a school, and I watch the little kids when they're first going back to school. The young ones are so happy, and they're like skipping and running and jumping, and they're laughing, and it's so much fun. They're curious about everything. But I also have a bus stop here where the high school kids come. And the high school kids, it's like they are dragging themselves, looking at their phones, hardly making it to the bus, so uninvolved in life. And so I'm thinking consciousness where you're pursuing things that are interesting to you, they stimulate yourself, they stimulate your ideas, your creativity, and then providing the everyday moments of joy for your subconscious.
Love it. Thank you so much. What is your definition of God?
I think I think we all have this divine spark of God within us. And then if I look at what is our idea of what's the point of our lives, it is realizing we are a divine expression of God in the same way that the flower is, and the tree and the plant. That's who we are.
Thank you. And what is the ultimate purpose of life from your perspective?
I think that's what I think I just answered that. To remember who we are, be the best of who we are in that greater, more expansive realm, and allow our inner kids to be the best of who they are. And to me, I think that divine expression is always staying, as much as possible, staying cognizant of that and expressing that, I walk out thinking I am a divine expression of God.
Wonderful. And lastly, where can people find out more about you? Where can people sign up for the Blueprint classes?
Okay, I have a website, which is archmeditationcenter.com. But Arch is spelled ARCHE. And that actually stands for the divine principles within us. So it's ARCHE meditationcenter.com. And that has all the um, places where you can email me, where you can contact me, where you can register for the classes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, that was all the questions I had for you, Sandy. I want to thank you so much for taking this time to talk to us, to share your knowledge and your wisdom. I already feel my spirits, raised. I feel the empowerment from our conversation raising my spirits. I'm sure if I had a plant here, the plant would be all going crazy. So, so thank you so much for taking time for talk to us. And yeah, if you want to find out more about Sandy, all the links will be in the description. And yeah, thank you so much. Praise the sun.
Well, thank you, Sage. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.